Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nerderous Media. Today, we'll be discussing Vampire the Masquerade. Now, this is a very iconic game that has gotten a lot of people into the tabletop role playing genre and basically pretty much defined an entire generation of gaming. Now, to get into it, some of the differences I wanted to cover were between the iconic Vampire the Masquerade Revised Edition, which you see second editions right over there, and the new V5. And I think, one of the most overlooked aspects of the game that a lot of people, at least for what I'm seeing online, are not necessarily playing. Now, that is the ThinBloods. To talk about the ThinBloods, see, ThinBloods and the Revised Edition were very, you know, they mentioned them and everything like that, but they didn't really go into them. It wasn't like a big thing. Mostly it was in the prophecy here in the Book of Nod, which we'll go over in just a second. But in Revised Edition, the only mechanical aspects of the ThinBloods was basically that everything costs double. So all your blood point expenditures cost double. You were unable to create a blood bond, and then if you tried to create a vampire, it was only successful 20% of the time. And to be a thin blood, you would be generation 14th or higher. So starting level character who did not put points into the background merit would start at generation 13, and then from there, if they had a childer, like say another player character, that player character would be a thin blood and would have to take that thin blood flaw, which was only a 4-point physical flaw. That's not even that bad of a flaw considering that, what is it? Light aversion or something like that's a 5-point flaw, and like light does extra damage to you and things like that. Now, in the Book of Nod, all right, page 111, is going to be the Thin Blood. Or is it? That's 133. It's going to be the prophecy, the time of thin blood. Sorry, that's the awakening of the Dark Father. So we're getting close to that. 112. Here we go. 111. The time of thin blood. Now, you see that? That's pretty hard to read right there. And the time of thin blood. But basically, what it says in the Book of Nod is that it says, "There will come a time when the curse of the one above will not be tolerated further, when the lineage of Cain will end, when the blood of Cain will be weak, and there will be no embracing for these childer. For their blood will run like water, and the potence in it will wither. Then you know, in this time, that Gehenna will soon be upon you." Now, that was a huge point in the meta plot of the old vampire game, was the fact that Gehenna was coming. The ancients were waking up and things like that. And so thin bloods were actually supposed to be a big deal, kind of a big point in the gaming itself. Now, to cover that, in V5, they really put an emphasis on that, because you see in the revised edition, it kind of just boiled down to all the super cool powers, all the super cool abilities were only accessible at a lower generation. So it just became a gambit of who can Diablerize quickly and who can get to the lowest generation faster to get access to the powers, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, that's thickening the blood. That's away from the thin bloods. And so there wasn't that focus on it. And it kind of detracted from the personal horror of the story and the actual like essence of being a vampire, and became more focused on what type of clan you were and what kind of powers you could have and things like that. Now in V5, they really upped the ante, and they made... Now, Vampire already is super extensive, and all the variations you can have between all the clans and everything like that. And just look at this book. This book is beautiful. But basically, what it is they have, in the clan section, the thin-blooded. They also went into the caitiff a little bit more as well. So they're really pushing this, clanless, the caitiff, the clanless, and the thin-blooded, things like that. Now, a lot of players are going to rush into their favorite clans. Their Ventrus, their Malkavians. Me, it's the Zamesis, which hasn't been released officially yet, but some playtest stuff I hear is cool. We'll see when it's released. But the thin bloods are very different than just a 4-point physical flaw here, where blood points, are doubled and everything. Now, it does go to say that blood points are a major difference between the hunger meter, which is how hungry you are, as opposed to blood points. That is a huge difference, which I'm going to cover in a different video. Now, this one's really just the difference of the thin bloods from this edition, which was just a 4-point physical flaw, to this one, which actually has quite a lot of different characteristics, which are kind of really cool if you go ahead and you think about it. And so, like, some of these cool characteristics are the fact that, you know, the ThinBloods, they can't form blood bonds. They can't make ghouls except for one night, so their blood only holds a potency to make a ghoul for one night. They can't get their blood potency above 0, which is another mechanic, the difference between, like, in the revised edition, if you became a certain generation, you got all the benefits of that generation, yada yada. This one, you could be a 12th generation but have a blood potency higher than a 10th or 9th generation just because you've been around longer. And so that's a good way for age to be able to be measured better mechanically. On top of that, they never suffer clan bane or compulsion, so they're always going to be considered clanless or of the caitiff, and not even considered really truly full vampires. Now, most of the time they take damage like mortals, but they'll mend like vampires. So they won't heal without expending hunger or rouse or making a hunger rouse check or spending blood points for the old schoolers. And then they can't learn disciplines. The only way they can have vampiric disciplines is either by learning a trait that the ThinBloods created called ThinBlood Alchemy, which is its own discipline in the book, and it's freaking cool. And also the drinking a blood resonance that grants a discipline of a certain type of that resonance. The more potent the resonance, you can have up to 2 dots on the discipline, but it's fleeting. It'll only last a hunger 5 or until the next time you feed, which will probably be a different resonance, so then your powers will change. So their powers are constantly changing. They're unpredictable, and that might make them very, very fun to play, is the fact that you can kind of tailor them to the moment, as well as you can play something different every night in terms of the power sets. Now, they won't frenzy, okay, unless they're supernaturally compelled to frenzy by, say, the discipline of another vampire. They won't frenzy because their beast isn't quite as strong. On top of that, they do feel the hunger like other vampires. They have to drink blood, and so, you know, that's something that they have to go for. And then they Now, the thing about it is they always count as having used Blush of Life. So vampires can spend a point of blood for Blush of Life or make a rouse check for Blush of Life in V5. And what that means is their heart beats, their skin gets a little color to it. They can pass as living. You know, if they're going to get vital signs taken, they'll pass the vital signs with a good blood pressure, things like that. ThinBloods, they don't have to make the rouse check. They always have those vital signs. Now, they take far less damage from sunlight, okay? And some can even walk in the day, and that is due to the ThinBlood merits, which is page 182. So we'll go to the ThinBlood merits. Now, the ThinBlood merits is where you fine-tweak the physiological things that I just described. And those are the differences between them and another vampire. Otherwise, they're considered a full another vampire. See, like ThinBlood merits, like day drinker, you know, basically you can walk in the day, things like that. And it's really cool what they've done with the ThinBloods. The way ThinBlood alchemy works is, I mean, there's 3 different ways you can prep the alchemical mixture. You have to have components. You need to have certain types of blood. I mean, it's not easy. They're not like power stacked or anything like that, but it is really unique, very cool, and adds for a whole cool style of play that allows you to really immerse yourself in that vampiric essence that the game has that it can capture without it becoming a power run of like who's older, whose blood's thicker, things like that. Now, I think they got inspiration for the current ThinBloods in V5. See, I highly recommend that as storyteller ask the troop to have at least one ThinBlood in there, or maybe point to the ThinBloods or the caitiffs or whatnot as something to check out. Just because, I mean, it is good to be a full-fledged vampire and all that kind of stuff, but the ThinBloods are super cool and definitely worth a check out. Now, I think they got the inspiration from Kindred of the East, specifically the Damp Years on page 221. The thing about the Kindred of the East Damp Years is that the Kindred of the East are like vampires based off of Eastern mythology, things like that. And where is it? 221. That's 211. All right. But basically, they feed off of chi energy, which is carried in the blood. At higher levels, they can take it from breath or just from the environment around them. But they're pretty much the exact same as vampires, just different. You know, the exact same, but different. In the sense that, they drink blood, they have similar powers, but stranger powers. Instead of turning to ash, they decay. Sunlight will make them decay, things like that. They have yin and yang chi. Now, if a Kwai Jin, or as the Western vampires call them, Cathians, have a whole bunch of yang energy. They can have blush of lives, and they can even give birth to children, or have children, or impregnate immortal. And that creates a Dampier, which is a half human, half vampire, like Blade from Marvel. Dampiers have powers of vampires and weaknesses of mortals. They live for hundreds of years, things like that. Now, the ThinBloods in V5, they're immortal. You stake them, they go into torpor, they'll live forever, things like that. But a lot of the aspects of, in Revised Edition, basically in Revised, the ThinBloods, they were just normal vampires, just everything was doubled. So they couldn't go in sunlight. I mean, literally just a normal vampire, just everything was doubled for blood point expenditure. Now, what's crazy about that is that the Dampiers, they can walk in sunlight. They can have a weakened, lesser version of powers than, say, a full-blood Cathian. Whereas Revised ThinBlood with the 4-point physical flaw could have powers all the way up of any discipline. You could have a thin-blooded Lasombra that had the Lasombra clan flaw, and the only way you could tell they were a ThinBlood is if you drank their blood and did some kind of ritual or whatnot on it, or you noticed that it took them a lot longer to pull off abilities because they had to use more blood, or they got hungrier and had to drink more often after using their powers. That's the only way. Otherwise, they have full access to every single thing the vampires have. Not so in here. See, Dampiers can walk during the day. They have diluted powers of the Cathians, but they have unique, interesting powers that are slightly separate from the Cathians. And that's basically what they did with the ThinBloods here. ThinBloods here do not have access to disciplines whatsoever unless they take the merit, which is a discipline affinity, which only gets them one discipline that they can increase at an extensive payment, XP and all that stuff to get to it. Otherwise than that, they only have access to a very diluted amount of power based off of the blood they drink that night that lasts as long as that blood lasts in their system. And it's only as powerful as the resonance of the blood that they drink, unless they learn how to mystically augment their blood through the ThinBlood alchemy. So it's quite literally taking this, skinning it with the Dampier, and then putting it here. They live forever. Sunlight can hurt them, but they could walk in the day if they have that merit. It's very interesting. And that is why ThinBloods are really, really worth a look. I mean, come on. They're not allowed to be in the Camarilla, but they can be in the Anarchs, all that good stuff. They're really worth a look at. And if you're running a game in V5, I highly recommend you have a SPC or ask a player character if they'd like to explore the ThinBloods. There's a lot of really cool stuff. And having a ThinBlood in your troop, in your coterie, forces other aspects of the game that are wildly different from Revised, but I think take what Revised was trying to capture and adding a flair of just artsiness to it. Some like blood resonance is cool, man. It's like they took the idea of resonance from Mage the Ascension, applied it to the blood the vampires drank, and then gave a mechanical aspect to it, which makes the game very fascinating. You hunt different victims. It brings the humanity into it. It makes the act of hunting and feeding and the results of such a little bit different than just rolling a dice to see if you found blood to fill up your blood point meter. Then you can get about being an undead immortal god. I mean, come on. It's really cool. Give it a try. Thanks for watching. I'm going to make some more videos about V5, how it differs from Revised Edition, and how those differences, I think, are unique and really enjoyable. Something fresh. I mean, nothing's ever going to really beat the iconic game, but come on, guys. Let's give V5 a legit shot. It's been over a year. I've been playing in it. I like it a lot. Let's see where it goes. Thanks for watching. Please give a like. Please subscribe. And thanks for watching, Nerderous Media. Bye, y'all.